Well, welcome all. Welcome to this very exciting next milestone in what has been a long journey to get us to this point. First of all, I want to thank the Retired Enlisted Association for hosting today. It's good to be back here. I've been here before, but as somebody who started my career as an enlisted soldier, as Private Crow, I have a very special place in my heart for our enlisted men and women and for TRIA. So thank you very much for hosting. And I also want to just give a shout out to the other folks. There's so many people to recognize here today. And I won't be able to say everybody, but a special shout out to Mayor Kaufman. Mayor Kaufman, where are you? Right there. Thank you for being here and for supporting and doing everything you've done to help support this project. And for your leadership in the city of Aurora as well. Captain Eric Mosley, Captain Mosley, please if you'd stand up. And I know that we have a lot of the Mosley family. There's a lot of Mosley family here today that came in from out of town as well. So if you're a member of the Mosley family, can you please stand up and be recognized? We also have Lieutenant Colonel John Porch with the Tuskegee Airman. Would you stand up, please? Porch, thank you very much. And Tom Talamonte with the Eastern Region, the Deputy Director of the Eastern Region VA Healthcare System. Tom, thank you. So this is, like I said at the beginning, this is just another step in the path to getting this clinic built. But a couple of years ago, when I was going through the process of the renaming of what is now Central Park, because one of the people that was in the contention for the naming of used to be Stapleton, which has a bad history, that name, and our community realized that we didn't want something named after someone that had that history, so we went through the naming process, and Lieutenant Colonel John Mosley was one of the people who folks from the community stood up and said, we need to recognize him. And I remember reading the story, and I was just in awe about his path. Right? Amazing athlete, family man, somebody who literally had to fight for the opportunity to serve, who went and paid for his own flight instruction to become a pilot. So then he could then become a Tuskegee Airman and serve this country that he loved. And then that was not enough. Served again and continued to serve in uniform, but then came back here to Colorado. And the entire Mosley family were pioneers in politics, in racial desegregation, and helping us heal as a community. It is a story of service after service after service. And the through line for me is one of humility, humble servant leadership that speaks in everything that Lieutenant Colonel John Mosley did throughout his life. And I did not have the pleasure of getting to know him. But just reading the story, I got glimpses of the man that he was and talking to his family since then. And I knew that our community had to recognize him in memorial and that this new VA clinic had to be named after Lieutenant Colonel John Mosley. So I was able to put a bill together. We got it passed on a total consensus basis. And we're very proud that we are very close, or getting closer, to the construction of the site in the eventual day when the veterans of Colorado and the Rocky Mountain region will walk through the doors and they'll see that name, Lieutenant Colonel John Mosley, and they'll read his story every time they walk into that building to get the care that they have earned. And we will keep that history and that legacy alive. So I'm very, very proud to be here today. And I will turn it over to Deputy Director Tom Talamonte. Thank you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you all for being here to take time today to celebrate the life of Lieutenant Colonel John Mosley in the VA clinic that will be named in his memory. We're especially thankful to have the memories shared with the Mosley family with us here today. Lieutenant Colonel Mosley was an incredible man, from college to the Air Force to civil rights. He broke barriers throughout his life. Each February, Black History Month encourages us to raise stories of change makers like Lieutenant Colonel Mosley to highlight the incredible accomplishments of Black Americans. In the armed services, Black Americans have contributed to our nation's freedom from the very beginning. They have provided military service in every single one of our nation's wars, from the American Revolution to Operation Enduring Freedom to Operation Iraqi Freedom. Today we honor the service and sacrifice of all these brave men and women to honor Lieutenant Colonel Mosley. As I'm sure you know, Mosley was a Tuskegee Airman. The valor and successes of these airmen and Black servicemen and women during World War II blazed the desegregation of military units. In July 1948, President Harry Truman signed an executive order desegregating the military and requiring equal treatment and opportunity without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin. At VA Eastern Colorado Healthcare System, we are proud to honor the exceptional veterans and namesakes of our clinics. Lieutenant Colonel Mosley will join two other heroes that share our clinic's names. Private First Class Floyd K. Lindstrom, a Medal of Honor recipient, and Private First Class James Dunn, a Navy Cross recipient. These three men embody the very best of what we expect of those in uniform. Their courage, tenacity, and sacrifices remind us of the significance of our mission at VA, caring for those who shall borne the battle. As a parting thought, I'd like to thank the Mosley family for the service of Lieutenant Colonel Mosley and others in your family. We're proud to have this name part of our clinic in preserving Lieutenant Colonel Mosley's legacy. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce Aurora Mayor Mike Coffenser.
Thank you. First of all, I'll draw a connection that my father was a retired United States Army Master Sergeant. So, I was a prior enlisted U.S. Army and then officer in the Marine Corps. And one of my, when I first took over a rifle platoon, one of the Marines came up to me and said, "Oh, sir, you were prior enlisted. That makes you a Mustang." And I said, "Yeah, I was enlisted in the Army." He said, "That doesn't count." So, but anyway, I just want to thank Congressman Crow for his work in really understanding our community and the history and legacy of this city by selecting somebody who was so extraordinary, John Mosley. And I came back from the Marine Corps the first time. I later went to the first Gulf War and the Iraq War. But when I came back the first time, and I got to meet John Mosley. And John and Edna were, as John was dedicated to this country in a service as a Tuskegee Airman, and later in the United States Air Force, having served, volunteered for Korea and later for Vietnam, that as dedicated he was to the country, he was dedicated to this city. And you could not turn a corner without running into John or Edna Mosley. And so a lot of firsts for the family. I think we've heard so much about John, Lieutenant Colonel Mosley, but also Edna was the first African-American elected to the Aurora City Council. And what an extraordinary leader that she was. And so, I mean, if you think about the history of the city of Aurora, it is first as a military community, and second as as the most diverse city in the state of Colorado, and one of the most diverse in the country, with a civil rights legacy for which I think John and Edna Mosley really embodied. And so there is no better name to be placed on this VA clinic. And again, thank you, Congressman Crow, for really defining this community by naming this VA clinic after such an extraordinary resident of our city, former resident of our city. I can't thank you enough, and we in the city are so proud to have this clinic, this VA clinic, named after Lieutenant Colonel John Mosley. And I'm going to introduce his son, Captain Eric Mosley, who, when I saw him, I said, "You look like your dad." You really look like your dad. And you're blessed to have such extraordinary parents. And thank you for being here today and sharing the legacy of Lieutenant Colonel John Mosley. Thanks.
Yeah, good afternoon, folks. You know, it really sounds like all I really need to do is say thank you and step off the stage left, because everything that really needs to be said about my father, Colonel John Mosley, has already been said. I thank you, Congressman, for your wonderful tribute, and your office for all the things that they have done to make this project a reality. Also, thank you to all the dignitaries in uniform and out of uniform. It's really all about the vets. I'd like you to give yourself a hand, if you would, please. Thank you for being here to celebrate. Thank you again, Congressman, for recognizing my family. I kind of had that scripted out, and was going to have the Mosley and all the other connected families, the Futrells and Doughertys, stand up. But I think I'll have them stand up again, if you would, please.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Futrells, please stand up and be recognized. All right. Also want to recognize members of an organization that was near and dear to my father's heart. He was one of the founding members of our local Denver chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen, the Hubert L. Hooks Jones chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. So all members of the Tuskegee Airmen's organization here in Denver, please take a bow as well. Thank you very much. Our chapter president in the back. Thank you very much. A little bit about the Tuskegee Airmen organization, which again, my father was one of the founding members many years ago, is to continue, perpetuate, defend, and just speak the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. That's one of their biggest missions. Another very big mission that they have is to provide opportunities for the youth in the community through various scholarships. And so I encourage you to check out their website, TuskegeeAirmen.org. ColoradoRedtails.org, and also a companion piece, the Mile High Flight Organization, which is a part of our local Tuskegee Airmen chapter. If you'd like to support or just read a little bit about what we've been doing in the community, I encourage you to visit both of those websites. Want to express just great gratitude on behalf of the Mosley family and the extended families, nieces, nephews, sons and daughters, grandparents or grandchildren, daughters and great-great-granddaughters as well. Thank you all for being here. It's an incredible honor, not only because this building will one day bear the name of my father, but also because what it represents to the community, both veterans and the families of veterans. And so this is certainly something that is truly meaningful to myself and to my entire family as well. Dad was all about legacy. And don't get me wrong, he had, I think, typical swag for veterans. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? And as a Tuskegee Airman, as one of the first, and I think one of the finest pilots to be recognized in World War II, you know, he was very proud of his accomplishments. He worked very hard to achieve what he and all the rest of the Tuskegee Airmen were able to achieve. But one thing that he was very, very clear about is that as important as our histories are, as important as our legacies are, what he truly found valuable and meaningful was what we will do for those who come after us, what we'll do for the next generation. Can I get an amen on that? Amen. All righty, thank you. And in that regard, many of the activities that he was deeply involved in, you know, had to do with not only perpetuating the legacy of those heroes, but also setting the stage and preparing the way for those to follow. Dad always said, and you know, Congressman, you said it, but I'm going to modify it just a little bit. His actual words were, you know, I had to fight in order to fight. A little bit about his history. Dad was born in 1921. He was a native son of Denver, Colorado. He was the son of my grandmother, who was a domestic, and his father, who was born before the end of the Civil War in Missouri. They came to Denver looking for opportunity, and they found it. Dad obviously had very humble beginnings, but from the very beginning of his life, he was set to really make his mark and take advantage of the opportunities that were available in this great country of ours. He was a standout student at Whittier. He went to Manual High School, where he was the class valedictorian, and back in the days when there was only one class valedictorian. So he was the man. Not only was he a superstar in the classroom, but out of the classroom as well. He excelled in sports. He was an undefeated wrestler. Many of you probably know that he is in the Sports Hall of Fame for Colorado State University, where he went to college, and also in the Colorado Hall of Fame for his achievements as an Aggie, as they were known back in the day. His first love was trying to be a veterinarian. He wanted to be a doctor of animals. But at that time, those opportunities weren't available, quite frankly. You know, with all the things he did, by the way, I'll tell you a quick side story that just really fascinates me. As impressed as I am as a pilot, as an Air Force pilot, as I was also, as distinguished as the Tuskegee Airman history was, what really impressed me the most was that in the day and age of in-your-face segregation, he was voted twice for his college class as class vice president. Now, if you can imagine, you know, just kind of close your eyes and imagine, you couldn't live on campus, was denied access to become a veterinarian. As many of you know, CSU has arguably one of the best veterinarian programs in the entire country, if not in the entire world. But he didn't have that opportunity because he was a black man. But if you can imagine, in spite of all of that, to be elected by his colleagues and fellow students at a obviously predominantly white university as their class vice president, not 1 but 2 years, you get a sense of the kind of man that Dad was. So he was a rock star in so many regards. It's just amazing. Some people say you're following in his footsteps. You two were an Air Force pilot, and that's blatantly false. I would never claim to that high mantle of following in his footsteps. I kind of like to say I'm kind of meandering along that path in my own kind of circuitous way. But actually following in footsteps, that's an honor that I really can't claim. But he served, as you know, as a Tuskegee Airman. He got out right after the war. The service, as you know, was desegregated by executive order by our then President, Harry S. Truman. But the change that he was anticipating, the change that all of the Tuskegee Airmen were anticipating, didn't happen. So in a bit of frustration, I think, he left for a short amount of time, active service, came back to his hometown of Denver, Colorado, and started or continued his life of service as a counselor and as a director of the YMCA on Glenarm. That's kind of how it began. And as things began to change, he came back into the service. He was in uniform, as the mayor said, for 3 major wars, both World War II, the Korean War, and finally the Vietnam War. He left as a lieutenant colonel in 1969. Coming back to Denver after his active service, he participated actively as a member, as a creator, a founder, and a leader of many of the groups that still remain today, as a matter of fact. And just very, very proud of the overall service that he and my mother, as the mayor said, the first black city councilwoman in the city of Aurora. But they did so many things. As a matter of fact, people from Buckley, can I get a show of hands? How many people are from Buckley? Yes, and you know that the school that is right behind you, also named for Mom and Dad, Edna and John P8 School. The Red Hawks, the Red Tail Hawks, is their motto, and their animal avatar, I guess. But they've been recognized, which is a real blessing for all the things that they've done. And now, again, we're just very fortunate that, Congressman, that you've taken that initiative, and this is yet another honor, I think, so befitting of a rock star father and a superstar mother as well. So thank you for that. The theme that I think has been kind of shared throughout is service and sacrifice. And as I want to kind of connect and kind of draw to a close, two themes that are so familiar to everybody in this room. Service and sacrifice for those who have served their nation in uniform and in other forms of service. And I want to think about all the young men and women in my personal family who have worn that uniform and served their country so proudly. Service and sacrifice to community. And as I look with such great pride at my nieces and nephews and my sister who have shared and served so honorably and so diligently their communities. And so I'm so proud of them. I feel it's just important that as I'm recognizing my father, who set the bar and set it very high, that legacy, which he was so interested in preserving and continuing, has certainly taken root in his family. So I'm very, very proud of that. And last and certainly not least, service and sacrifice to family. And as, again, I look and see, so many wonderful examples, mothers and daughters and soon-to-be fathers, perhaps, and fathers and my grandniece and nephews that are sitting out in the audience. I just feel like it's so very important. And to all of you other service members, both in uniform and out of uniform, I commend and salute you as well for that legacy of service and sacrifice. Coming to a close, kind of bringing it all together with the mission statement of the VA, and thank you very much, and I'll read. Our mission as the Department of Veteran Affairs is to care for those who shall have borne the battle, and for their families, caregivers, and survivors. In those core values, which they refer to as I care, integrity, commitment, advocacy, respect, and excellence. And for our representative from the VA, again, I salute you as well. Thank you so much for your support in bringing this all together. And, thank you again for recognizing and honoring my family and my father. They would be proud to be here today to accept the accolades themselves, but I know they're smiling down on us from above. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And last but certainly not least, or not last at all, actually, I think the Congressman will be wrapping things up, but I'd like to introduce my colleague and friend, the president of the Hubert L. Hooks Jones chapter, Lieutenant Colonel John Porter.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Growing up, someone told me this phrase, humble with dignity, humility with pride. And today represents like that whole sentence. Eric is and his family is relatively humble, believe it or not, because what he's achieved in Mile High Flight is recognized nationally in bringing flight, the joy of flight, to many, many young people. We are lucky in Colorado, in this region, just to have him. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Our local chapter is focused and founded by John Mosley, and we are focused on continuing the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. And Mile High Flight is just one of those ways. So when we think about that sentence, humble with dignity, humility with pride, doesn't mean that we want to forget the John Mosleys, because the young people that Eric is teaching and showing, they need to know what's the milepost, what's the marker in that tough hike on that mountain, how do I get there? He's shown us the path. Eric and the Mosleys have shown us the path. And so let's take this moment. It's fantastic to have a great, happy celebration day, and this is one of them, and recognize that this is the way. They've shown us the way, and let's go ahead and continue. I don't want to take up all your time, but with that, I want to pass it on to Congressman Crow. Are you ready? You want to come on up? And thanks so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Colonel. Appreciate it. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize Colonel Jackson as well. Colonel Jackson, would you stand up for a moment here? The Garrison Commander of Buckley Space Force Base, as well as members of the leadership team as well. Stand up. Thank you. Buckley Space Force Base is such a huge part of our community, and Colonel Jackson and his team, they show up. They recognize that when you are assigned to a community, it's just not a temporary posting, but you need to show up, you need to engage, you need to be a part of that community, and both of you really embody that sentiment. So thank you for your continued leadership. And of course, Rick Crandall, my buddy. I always got to give my buddy Rick Crandall a shout out, the head of the Colorado Freedom Memorial. We're going to do great things at the Colorado Freedom Memorial as well. Some exciting things happening there. So we have an address. We were going to be at the site where this is going to be built, but we decided not to freeze everybody. So I think that was the right move. But it is going to be at 21825 East Quincy in Aurora, which is near 470. That is where the facility is going to be built. It's going to look like this. So the next time we do this and we get together, we're going to be standing right out here with those large scissors to do a big ribbon cutting. And we have our friends from the general contractor, DCB Construction, the team that's going to help construct it. And they've guaranteed me it's going to be on time, right? Maybe even a little bit early if you could do it. Mayor Kaufman and I will be watching. So thank you all. Thank you for your kinship, your service to the community. Thank you most of all to the Mosley family and descendants of John and Edna who have carried forward that legacy through the way that you serve this community in multiple ways. I'm grateful for that. And onward to fall of 2024. Thank you. Yeah, today was another major milestone on this journey to build the new VA clinic in Aurora that's going to be named after a Colorado hero and an Aurora hero, Lieutenant Colonel John W. Mosley, a Tuskegee Airman who fought for the right to serve our country and was a decorated combat pilot. His family is still very involved in our community to this day, and it's a story that we're going to have to tell for generations. So this is the site dedication for the VA clinic, and we're excited to eventually open this clinic in the fall of 2024.
And Congressman, if you could tell us, how did this come about? Like, how did this idea present itself? Yeah,
during the process of the renaming of the Central Park neighborhood, the story of Lieutenant Colonel Mosley was highlighted to me, and ultimately the neighborhood was not named after Colonel Mosley, but I read his story and I was blown away of somebody who was a decorated war hero, but he had to actually fight just for the opportunity to serve our country. Not once, not twice, but 3 times going to war for our nation. And then coming home and helping desegregate our military, and then serving in a variety of capacities in Aurora and the Denver area. This is somebody whose entire life was dedicated to service, and it's a story that we have to tell for generations, which is why I was very proud to lead the effort to name the new VA clinic after Colonel Mosley.
The only question I had for you is, what was it when you told the family this is what you wanted to do and name the VA clinic after their father, and what was their response to you?
Yeah, they were completely supportive. They were blown away as well. We had an initial ceremony last year where we talked about and unveiled the naming of the new clinic. This is the site dedication, and we'll have another one in fall of 2024 when the actual site opens up. But the Mosley family is a large family. They're very involved in our community. They continue to serve. A number of them have gone on to serve in the Air Force and have served as pilots, both in civilian and in military roles. So it's really just an incredible family that has done so much for our community.
Oh, this is a wonderful day. I miss my father, and I love that people are seeing him for the wonderful man he was. He was a hard as rock dad, but he was very committed to community, always. From his early days in Denver to the day he died.
And was this something that you envisioned, your father having this center named after him?
Though I knew my father to be, and my mother, to be exceptionally active in the community, whatever community they lived in. I never expected any of this to ever happen. This is wonderful. Mom and Dad have a school named after them, and that's incredible. They believed in education as a manner to bring yourself out of poverty, out of horrible situations, that education was number one. And to have a school named after, and now to have a place that will help veterans, this is exceptional. This is wonderful.
And did your father, did he have any stories that he told about his time in the service? Something that he would bring up or anything like that that he remarked on with his time in the service?
Well, I'm an older woman. I was born on an air base in Utah, and Pop stayed there until I was in college, stayed in the armed forces, in the Air Force. So from then until the 60s, when I was up at CU, my father served, and I lived the stories with him. I lived the stories that Mom and Dad had. Oftentimes they were in very difficult situations, but they handled it with exceptional grace. Exceptional grace.
I was going to ask you, when Congressman Crow approached you or told you he has this idea to name the new VA hospital here in Aurora after your father, what was your first thought process, or what was your thought that went through your
And my thought was, I was just stunned, because it's an exceptional honor. It's exceptional. And I'm very, very, very happy about it.
What do you hope that veterans will do when they come through that doors and they see your father's name on that building? What do you hope they take from that, or take a moment to look at that name? What do you hope they,
I think that what will happen is being able to, if you're a person of color, relate to that being the name of the facility that you'll be using. It's so rare. And that's another reason why it's wonderful.
And another question I had for you is, what would your father think of a VA named after him? If you could kind of go back, and I know you said you spoke with your father and you told the story, what would you think he would think of?
He was not one to look out for himself to be praised or noted. He understood when he had to stand up, but he was not one to put himself forward.
Anything we didn't ask you you'd like to add or care to share?
My parents, both of them, were exceptional people. Aurora is one of the sister cities in the Sister City program, and Nairobi is something that Mom and Dad pushed. And for an African sister city, that's exceptional. They were involved in so much, and I love that people are hearing about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll let you get those microphones off of you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm with Channel 2 and Fox 3, so it's a duopoly. So it'll be with both channels and then Channel 7.
Channel 7. Well, and then we're sending it to all the other stations.
That's
too.
great.
So it might, it's like a...
That's great. Will this air tonight? Or will
Yes,
it air
should air.
And I'm going to just grab
Yes,
these
you
mics off
grab,
you.
because
Okay.
I don't know what I'm doing, and I
Thank
don't
you
want to
so
break your
much.
equipment.
And
I
then...
do know I have things on my waist.
It's my mom.
Okay, she said that she watches the 2 channels.
Yeah. We watch all
Rotates between the
between us. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
talking. Appreciate it.
Here we go. Good people.